This is not the first time that we have had the Volkswagen ID.3 up against an MG on the CarGurus UK YouTube channel. In fact, I had the ID.3 up against the MG ZS EV very recently, and the ID won, but by a tiny fraction. It was really, really close. MG's been good for a long time, but they are here to have another go at the ID.3 with this, the MG4. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it's not just, like a rehashed MG5 or ZS, it's a brand new platform from parent company SAIC. And that means that it's got a 201 brake horsepower electric motor on the rear axle, and it has also got a big battery that delivers you a range of up to 286 miles or 270 miles on this top range trophy car that we've got here, or you can also get a smaller battery car that does 218 miles. Prices start from £26,000 and go up to £31,500 for this top-spec long-range trophy that we've got here. And MG has also managed to deliver monthly finance deals as low as £300 per month. So you can see why when you look at the very similarly sized Volkswagen ID.3 and see that it also has a range of 260 miles, 201 brake horsepower, but costs from £36,000, why a lot of people are thinking that this, the MG4, might be the true beginning of the Chinese manufacturers coming in and disrupting those established car makers in the Western markets. It really is quite the thing, the MG, and it's making a few waves already. So, are we finally at a time where MG is going to beat Volkswagen? Well, let's find out. The MG4's 336-litre boot is a bit smaller than the ID.3's by official capacity. That's mostly because it's a fraction shallower and perhaps a touch narrower than the ID.3's boot, but you still get a good-sized boot floor that's usefully bigger than that in a Peugeot E208, for instance. But if there is anywhere in the MG that the cost saving is plainly visible, it's around these materials at the back of the seats. There is loads of room in the back of the MG4, a bit more than you'd get comparably in, something like a Volkswagen Golf, I think. But I would say, for context, I think it's very similar to the ID.3 in here for the amount of room you get. I reckon a Nissan Leaf's going to give you a little bit more leg room, but I like it back here. It's good. I do miss a centre armrest. I think that's a shame it doesn't have that, but you do get some nifty little pockets here for your phone, like that, and you've got some charging down there as well. Not bad. The ID.3 gets a bigger 385-litre boot, but in practice the difference between the Volkswagens and the MG's boots aren't really as much as the official figures suggest. That through-loading function in the ID.3 is quite useful though. So it's really similar in the back here to the MG4, like I said, very similar legroom, maybe a fraction less headroom. The glass roof seems to cut into the roof space in the ID.3 a touch more, but I mean, pretty, much of a muchness really. It's really comfy back here, and you get your armrest. You get 2 charging points instead of the 1 in the MG4, and of course you've still got your little phone pocket there as well. So generally, actually pretty good. Equipment in the MG4 is really great, with even the cheapest SE car getting LED headlights, alloy wheels, a 10-inch colour touchscreen with Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and dual-zone climate control. You have to step up to the trophy model that we've got here to get heated seats, leatherette and a 360-degree parking camera. The ID.3's trim range has been slimmed down to help the company cope with the microchip crisis in 2022, so you can now only have it in life trim, which gets a very similar level of equipment to the MG4 trophy, although you do have to go without leather upholstery. We will point out here that our test car is a higher spec ID.3 Max model from the 2021 trim lineup. As for charging, the MG4 tops out at 135 kilowatts, which means that you will get a 10 to 80% charge in around 35 minutes. However, the ID.3 tops out at 100 kilowatts, but has a slightly smaller 58 kilowatt hour battery, so will take a similar time for an 80% rapid charge. A full battery at home from a 7 kilowatt wall box will take around about 9 hours in both. Interestingly, every MG4 also gets vehicle-to-device charging, which allows you to charge another EV or any electrical device from the car's high-voltage battery. So I'm going to start by talking about the driving position, which, do you know what, I quite like. It's not bad at all. The seat's kind of squishy, which is good. Reasonable side support. I do wish it had adjustable lumbar. In the trophy that we've got, you do get electric seat adjustment. Does the job, I think. It's pretty comfy. Visibility's not too bad. It's not brilliant to the rear and 3/4, but I don't mind it. I don't love this sort of squared off steering wheel. I'm still a bit against sort of anything but a round steering wheel. I feel it's kind of a bit unnecessary unless it's a Formula One car. Definitely not in an electric family hatchback, but there you go. MG's established itself as actually already being very good for electric cars. Interior quality has been one area where it's definitely sort of lagged behind rivals like Volkswagen, and I think the MG4 is a significant improvement. This screen behind the steering wheel, the graphics are really sharp, and the graphics are really nice on this touchscreen here. Now, this touchscreen, it is a big improvement on the ZS EV and the MG5, which themselves have only just really been updated, so you can see how quickly this brand is moving. It responds quickly enough. My big issue is that it's just not the most logical to use. For instance, climate control, you have to access, there's no shortcut to the climate, so you have to swipe across and then hit the icon, and then you get your aircon screen up. And sometimes it's not even that responsive when you're trying to do that. And all of this is just a bit of a faff, and then when you have got that screen up, I do like the fact that it's got these proper shortcut buttons down here to get you back to the home page all the time, then these icons on the climate control screen, for instance, are absolutely tiny, and that makes it really difficult to kind of, you know, change the temperature. Is a really tiny little kind of bar here. All of this stuff that's quite critical and that you might want to use quite often when you're driving, it's just really difficult, and I don't think that that's terribly good, to be honest. Perhaps most odd of all is the tiny fog light button that hides in the corner of the touchscreen rather than on the stalk with the rest of the light controls. And if you're going to tell me that voice control is the answer, here we go, let's try this.
I'm here.
Turn the temperature up.
Okay, temperature is raised to 24 degrees.
Oh, she did it that time. See, I've tried it a few times this morning. I'm getting, I think, about 2 out of every 3 attempts she actually does it. And sometimes, let's try the radio.
Hi, how can I help?
Play BBC Radio 6 music.
It seems I couldn't find that. Let's kick off with this one.
Well, at least she finds you a different option. So generally it's not bad, but I think MG's made the error of trying to go very Tesla about it and having everything on this screen, including your climate and also your dynamic stuff, so your brake regen and your drive modes. But because the screen is small, the icons are tiny, and that just makes it a bit difficult to use sometimes on the move. But even so, how does the MG4 drive? Well, do you know what? It's really, really good. Even the ride, actually, is not bad at all. It gets a little bit lumpy, and I have to say the suspension noise I find actually more intrusive than the ride comfort itself. But most of the time it's really soft, and apart from that little bit of kind of reverberative, kind of boomy noise from the rear suspension, really quiet. The steering's very predictable, nice and light. It feels like there's a lot more grip, and actually there's a bit more vigour to the handling in the MG4, certainly than there is in the ZS or the MG5. If you do delve into the modes on the screen here, once you've found your tiny icon to prod, then you can opt through adaptive brake regen, or you've got 3 different strengths, but it's never as strong as sort of one pedal driving like you get in the Nissan Leaf, for instance. It's very easy to predict. I quite like the adaptive mode on the MG4, actually. It doesn't seem to intrude too much like some others can. Everything about it just feels very predictable and sort of safe and secure and reassuring, really, and I think that's what you want. Even if you do stick it in sport mode, I mean, you're talking about 0 to 62 in 7.9 seconds in this car, so, I mean, it's not scorching, but it's fast enough. I genuinely like this car to drive. I think it's really quite a good thing. It's been well judged, and this new platform that the MG4 is on, I think, is obviously helping with that. I wouldn't worry about traction either. I know because it's rear-wheel drive, some people might be a bit worried about that. I mean, it's pretty damp out there now, and yet actually we've had absolutely no issues at all. As for real-world range in the MG4, well, we expect that you would see around about 180 miles on the motorway and in cold conditions as something of a worst-case scenario, while we saw something like 240 to 250 miles in middling 15-degree temperatures with a bit of motorway stuff thrown in. We would expect a very similar return from the ID.3, although perhaps a fraction lower. Right, so the Volkswagen ID.3. We're all pretty familiar with it now. It's been out for a few years. Lots of them out there. I do really like the ID.3. It's pretty well documented on CarGurus now that I am not a fan of the touch-sensitive temperature and volume controls and all this stuff. I think it's really a solution to a problem that wasn't there and is far less intuitive than just old-fashioned, you know, knobs or buttons. Still, if you can get over that, I do fear that the screen in the ID.3 is actually slightly better than in the MG4. Mainly just because of the layout. I think the icons are a bit bigger and it's just a bit more logical. But I think the graphics in the MG are nearly up there with the Volkswagen. And I have to say, when it comes to perceived quality in the ID, I think it does have the edge on the MG, because There's just a general sense of it being a bit better put together in here. I actually prefer the material in this car to the leatherette in the MG. Certain aspects of the damping, this sounds really silly, but even silly things like the sound that the indicator makes in the ID3, it's quite subtle, sophisticated, classy. Whereas in the MG, it's a bit like, you know, tick-tock, tick-tock, like really in your face indicating. There's just little details like that which kind of make a difference. So post-microchip crisis, I don't think you can add adaptive dampers to the ID3 anyway, and I don't mind that because it's better without. It's just a really nice handling car, and I've always found the adaptive dampers makes it sort of steer a bit funny and roll a bit more, and I'm not a huge fan, and even without, it rides pretty well. Both the ID and the MG4 weigh about 1.7 tonnes, and because you've got that extra weight in them from the batteries, you do get kind of a lumpy ride around town. This is definitely better for suspension noise. It's a touch more refined overall, in fact, I would say, the ID3. Steers really nicely. I think perhaps slightly heavier steering. I definitely prefer the nice, slim, straightforward steering wheel in the ID. A little bit better performance, so this is sort of closer to 7 seconds, 0 to 62 in the ID3. It just feels a touch more sophisticated, the Volkswagen. But we kind of expected that, didn't we? And like I said, the impressive thing is perhaps that the MG is as close as it is to the Volkswagen. So overall, if they cost the same, I would have the Volkswagen. That would be a reasonably easy decision for me. But they don't cost the same, do they? The Volkswagen is, it's 37 grand. And monthly, it's really quite expensive as well. Whereas you're talking about £300 and up for the MG. It's a huge saving. And yet, between the efficiency, the way it drives, it's a great car as well. Genuinely a great car. So it boils down to whether you'd pay the extra for the Volkswagen. And do you know what? I don't think I would. I think I'd settle for the MG, I'd live with the flaws, and I'd be very happy about my excellent and very, very well-priced electric car. Don't forget to go to cargurus.co.uk for a whole host of fantastic used cars, and while we've got you, please do like the video, subscribe to the CarGurus UK YouTube channel, and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any of our videos.